Do you think Captain Salazar is just a Disney invention? A ghost that only exists on a movie screen, dreamed up in a writer's room, and rendered in CG? Today, we're pulling back that curtain. Last time, you asked me one question in the comments, over and over. Where's the proof? So today, I'm not just going to tell you a story. I'm going to show you documents that were buried in Spain's darkest naval archives for nearly 300 years, records that were never meant to entertain anyone. Because history holds a man who did not fear death, and when death finally came for him, piece by piece, some say he simply refused to stay there. Today we're going to walk through the terrifying overlap between Salazar's ghost ship, the Silent Mary, and a real, flesh-and-blood Spanish officer they called the half-man Blas de Lezo. We're going to look at the actual orders Spain gave its deadliest captains. We're going to compare the bones of a fictional ghost ship to the blueprints of a real one. And we're going to read the logbook entries that convinced Royal Navy officers, trained professionals, whose careers depended on telling the truth that they had just watched something impossible cross their bow. And by the end of this video, I'm going to show you a maritime record that will send a chill straight down your spine. Before we sail into these depths, if mysteries like this keep you up at night, hit subscribe and tap that bell so you never miss a piece of evidence. This channel exists because of viewers exactly like you who refuse to accept it's just a movie as an answer. Now let's begin. Part 1, the paper trail. Orders written in blood. We start in 18th century Spain, inside the Archivo General de Indias in Seville, the single largest collection of Spanish colonial and naval records on Earth, and the place where, historians whisper, some of the empire's ugliest secrets were sealed away and quietly forgotten. Everyone assumes Salazar was just a pirate hunter, a stock movie villain with a script written for him by a studio. But when you actually open the real documents the Spanish crown issued to its most ruthless naval officers, the fiction starts to look uncomfortably close to fact. Picture the scene: a clerk in a candlelit office in Seville, dipping his quill, drafting a patente de corso, a privateering commission for a captain about to sail into the Caribbean. Most of these commissions were routine paperwork: hunt smugglers, escort the treasure fleets, collect a bounty, and go home. But a smaller, darker category of orders existed in the archive, reserved for men the crown considered its most dependable killers. These were not instructions to capture, these were instructions to erase. Spanish naval correspondence from this period repeatedly uses one chilling word for pirates operating in the Caribbean: pestilencia, a plague. And you don't negotiate with a plague. You don't put a plague on trial. You burn it out at the root before it spreads. Captains who received these darker commissions were given something close to exterminio total extermination authority. No mercy clauses written into the margins. No obligation to take prisoners back for trial. Just a mandate to make the Caribbean unsafe for any man flying a black flag, by whatever means a captain judged necessary. Read those words again. A legal document signed and sealed by royal officials ordering a naval captain to hunt human beings the way you'd hunt vermin in a granary. Now picture the film again. Watch Salazar stand on his shattered deck and describe pirates as a disease that needs curing. Suddenly that line isn't a screenwriter's dramatic flourish. It's an echo, almost word for word, of an actual, documented Spanish naval policy that existed for decades. Historians who've combed through these archives have surfaced the names of real captains who carried out this kind of order with a brutality that unsettled even hardened sailors, men whose own crews sometimes refused a second contract with them after seeing what extermination actually looked like at close range. One infamous case involves a Spanish naval officer who reportedly hunted down an entire pirate crew off the coast of Hispaniola, and rather than deliver them for trial, as regulations technically required, executed every prisoner at sea and logged the incident in 3 clipped, emotionless sentences. No names, no ceremony. Just a checkmark against a quota. That's the kind of paperwork sitting in those archives, and it's the kind of cold, mission-obsessed captain that Salazar, on screen, was built to resemble. There's a wider context that makes these orders even more disturbing. By the early 1700s, piracy in the Caribbean had grown from scattered opportunism into something closer to organized warfare against Spanish shipping lanes, and the crown's patience had run out. Losing a single treasure galleon could bankrupt an entire year's colonial budget. So the men chosen for these extermination commissions weren't picked for diplomacy or restraint, they were picked specifically because they wouldn't hesitate. Naval recommendation letters from the period describe ideal candidates using words like implacable, without weakness, and untroubled by mercy, phrases that read less like a job reference and more like a description of exactly the kind of captain a horror film would cast as its villain. Stay with us, because by the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why these buried orders matter, and why they may have shaped more of Salazar's character than any studio has ever publicly admitted. Part 2, The Real Half-Man, Blas de Lezo's Broken Body. Unbroken will now become to the man who arguably lent Salazar his soul, Blas de Lezo. In the film, Salazar's face is shattered, his body fused with the wreckage of his own ship, a walking ruin who simply refuses to stop moving. It's meant to feel impossible, almost supernatural. Blas de Lezo's real life was in some ways worse, because every injury he suffered actually happened, on paper, in front of witnesses, with no visual effects to soften it. In 1704, at the Battle of Malaga, a cannonball tore through his leg. Surgeons of the era had exactly one answer for wounds like that: amputation, performed with a saw, with no anesthetic beyond rum and a leather strap to bite down on. He was 17 years old. He lost the leg below the knee and, for the rest of his life, walked on a wooden peg. Sailors began calling him Patapalo Pegleg, the way you'd give a nickname to a ghost story you half believed. Most 17-year-olds who survive an injury like that go home for good. Blas de Lezo went back to sea within the year. Years later, at the siege of Toulon, shrapnel tore into his left eye. He lost it completely, and for the remainder of his life he wore a patch, or simply let the ruined socket show, uncovered and unapologetic, as if daring anyone to comment on it. Then came Cartagena de Indias, 1741, the battle that would define him forever. During the fighting, a musket ball shattered his right arm so badly that surgeons removed it at the shoulder. One leg, one eye, one arm. Sailors on both sides of the Atlantic began calling him Medio Hombre, the half-man. But here's the detail that should genuinely give you chills. None of it slowed him down. If anything, the men who served under him said he seemed to fear death less with every piece of himself the war took away. At Cartagena, this half-man, commanding a badly outnumbered Spanish garrison, faced down a British invasion force of nearly 200 ships and tens of thousands of soldiers and sailors, one of the largest amphibious assaults the world had seen before the 20th century. On paper, Spain had already lost. The numbers alone made the outcome look inevitable. Blas de Lezo held the line anyway. He directed the defense from a position where cannon fire regularly landed close enough to kill the men standing beside him, inflicting catastrophic losses on the British fleet and eventually forcing a humiliating retreat that saved the entire Spanish colony. Some historians argue that single battle quietly reshaped the balance of colonial power in the Americas for the rest of the century. He died of illness not long afterward, his body finally giving out in a hospital bed, the one thing that cannon fire, musket balls, and an amputation saw had all failed to accomplish in 3 separate wars. Now think about Salazar again, a captain so devoted to his mission that his own destroyed body couldn't stop him, sailing on long after any ordinary man would have surrendered to the sea. That isn't just a Hollywood metaphor dreamed up for spectacle. Somewhere in the historical record, a real man already lived that exact story, in wood, blood, and iron, decades before anyone put it on a movie screen. Part 3, The Silent Mary Versers, the Santisima Trinidad, a ghost built from real timber. Let's talk about the ship itself. The Silent Mary is one of the most striking vessels ever put on screen, a triple-decked leviathan, barnacled and rotting, half submerged and half alive, groaning like something that shouldn't still be floating. But where did that design actually come from? It didn't come from nowhere, and it definitely wasn't invented from a blank page. Spain's naval pride in the era Salazar's story is set was the Santisima Trinidad at the time, the largest warship on Earth, a 4-decked giant so massive that rival navies simply nicknamed her the Ponderous. Her hull carried over 140 guns stacked deck upon deck, an almost impossible weight of Spanish oak and iron riding low in the water, built to project raw imperial dominance rather than speed or grit. Compare her silhouette, the towering stacked decks, the ornate carved stern castle, the sheer overwhelming scale to the Silent Mary's design, and the resemblance stops looking like coincidence. This wasn't invented from pure imagination. It was lifted, plank by plank, from the actual blueprints of the most powerful navy on Earth at that time. Now picture what a ship like the Santisima Trinidad would genuinely look like after a century at the bottom of the ocean. The gilded carvings rotted down to black lace, barely recognizable. The gun ports gaping open like empty eye sockets in the skull. the hull no longer riding proud on the surface, but somehow clawing its way back up out of the deep, barnacles and coral fused permanently to timber that should have disintegrated centuries earlier. That image, a real 18th century Spanish warship, resurrected and rotting, still moving as if crewed by something that refuses to let go, is not a fantasy dreamed up purely for a theme park movie franchise. It's an eerily accurate answer to a question maritime historians have quietly asked for years. What would a genuine Golden Age galleon actually look like if the ocean ever did give one back? There's one more detail that rarely makes it into casual conversations about the film. Marine archaeologists working the Caribbean have documented dozens of wrecks from this exact era whose hulls, when finally located and mapped, show that same triple and quadruple deck stacking, the same oversized stern castle silhouette, the same unmistakable Spanish Golden Age proportions. The Silent Mary isn't an artist's fantasy bolted onto a random old ship shape. It's a composite built from the genuine skeletons still resting on the Caribbean seafloor today. Part 4 Maritime Myths, the sightings the Navy couldn't explain. So here's the real question. Did sailors actually see ships like this glowing, phantom, impossible vessels sliding across open water in full sail? The unsettling answer is yes, repeatedly, across multiple centuries. And some of the witnesses were the last people on Earth you'd expect to lie about it. 18th century sailors kept detailed logs of a phenomenon they called Fata Morgana, a superior mirage caused by layers of warm and cold air bending light across the ocean's surface, stretching a perfectly ordinary ship into something that looks like it's floating above the water, burning with unnatural light, or sailing upside down in the sky. It's a real, scientifically documented phenomenon, and treacherous shipping routes around the world's most dangerous capes were notorious for producing exactly this kind of illusion under specific weather conditions. But mirages alone don't fully explain what actually got written into official Royal Navy logbooks. In July of 1795, near a stretch of coastline infamous for shipwrecks, officers aboard a British warship with a future king of England standing on deck as a young midshipman watched a glowing, centuries out-of-date ship cross their bow at impossible speed, its tattered rigging catching wind that wasn't blowing anywhere near them. They didn't whisper about it in a tavern afterward. They wrote it down, signed it, and filed it into an official naval record that survives to this day. Hours later, the sailor who had first spotted the ship fell from the rigging and died on impact. Coincidence, or the beginning of a chilling pattern that would repeat across the following century, sighting after sighting, ship after ship, always logged in the world's most treacherous waters, always followed within days by tragedy. Decades later, an entire crew of 11 Royal Navy sailors independently reported watching the exact same kind of glowing, fully rigged phantom vessel cross their path during an early morning watch, moving at a speed that defied the almost total absence of wind that night. 11 trained observers, filing 11 consistent statements, describing the same silhouette, the same eerie silence, the same sudden disappearance into nothing. These weren't drunk fishermen swapping stories. These were career naval officers whose professional reputations depended entirely on distinguishing fact from fantasy, and they staked those reputations on what they'd seen. Now bring that same phenomenon back to Salazar's story. A crew obsessed with hunting pirates, doomed by a captain's refusal to ever stop, glimpsed for centuries afterward as a burning, impossible silhouette flickering on the horizon just before disaster strikes. The Silent Mary isn't an isolated piece of studio fiction, invented purely to sell tickets. It's built directly on top of a real, well-documented maritime terror that sailors have been logging, swearing to, and in some cases dying beside, for close to 300 years. Part 5, Why the Curse Always Returns. A pattern written across centuries. Here's something that should unsettle you more than any single sighting. Ghost ship legends almost never appear in isolation. They cluster around the same handful of locations, generation after generation, as if the ocean itself is keeping a record of every crew it swallowed. The Cape of Good Hope has the Flying Dutchman. The Caribbean's most treacherous straits have their own version: a captain who refused to turn back, a crew that paid for his obsession, and a ship that supposedly still sails those waters looking for the pirates it was built to destroy. Different names, different centuries, the same bones underneath. Historians who study maritime folklore have noticed this pattern for years and largely agree on why it exists. These weren't stories invented purely for entertainment around a fire. They were warnings, passed from an older sailor to a younger one, coded into something memorable enough to survive without being written down. Don't be the captain who pushes past the point of no return. Don't let ambition, profit, or pride outrun your judgment in waters that have already killed thousands of men exactly like you. Every version of this legend, whether it's a Dutch merchant captain cursing God during a storm, or a Spanish naval officer so consumed by his hunt for pirates that his own body stopped mattering to him, carries the same buried lesson. The sea does not forgive obsession, and it remembers every man who tested that rule. That's why Salazar's story lands so hard with modern audiences, even the ones who've never opened a single naval archive. Somewhere underneath the sea and the theme park spectacle, the bones of the story are older than the film itself, older than Hollywood, older than the studio that owns the license. It's a warning that sailors have been quietly repeating to each other for 300 years, dressed in new clothing for a new generation, and it still works. Because the fear underneath it was never fictional to begin with. Part 6, the final piece. The record no one can explain now. The record I promised you at the very beginning. Buried in a naval archive is a single terse entry from a Spanish patrol vessel logging a routine passage through waters long associated with sunken Golden Age fleets. The entry notes an unidentified triple-masted hull sighted at close range for several minutes in clear daylight, matching no known vessel registered in the area, before it simply ceased to be visible, with no debris, no wake, and no rational account of where it could have gone. The log was filed, stamped, and archived exactly like every other routine entry that week. No exclamation marks, no speculation, no ghost stories attached. Just a professional officer recording what his own eyes told him he saw, because that was his job, and leaving the explanation for someone else to figure out. Nearly 3 centuries later, we're still trying. Conclusion: the verdict. So, was Captain Salazar real? Maybe not as one single man walking around with that exact name. Maybe he's something more unsettling, the combined echo of thousands of real Spanish officers who gave everything: their limbs, their sanity, their crews, their lives to an empire that treated them as disposable the moment their mission was complete. The paper trail is real. The half-man's broken, unstoppable body is real. The ship's bones are real, sitting on the Caribbean seafloor to this day, and the sightings logged by terrified, credible, professionally trained witnesses across 3 centuries are real, signed and filed in archives that still exist for anyone brave enough to go looking. What do you think? Is there another buried piece of naval history we haven't uncovered yet? A name? A ship? A log entry still waiting in some forgotten archive? Tell me in the comments below, and if you want more proof like this, the links are waiting for you right now. Until next time, stay curious and stay careful of what you see on the horizon.